One thing that climate change activists and their critics agree on is the fact that climate change policies will require radical changes to society.
The law is an absolutely indispensable tool in the fight against climate change. Law is the way that a society captures what it believes we should all be bound by in any moment in time. And when it comes to climate change, we're going to need to fundamentally change our behavior, the way we run industry, the way we run transport, the way we make electricity. And all of that has to be captured in rules, and that's law.
This audio clip was taken from a BBC radio documentary series, 39 Ways to Save the Planet. The words belong to lawyer activist James Thornton, who founded the campaigning organisation Client Earth.
Client Earth is Europe's leading environmental law organisation.
Client Earth uses the courts to challenge government policy and planning decisions that it believes are inconsistent with a green future. But does this use of courts really enforce what society believes, as Thornton claims, or does it represent something else? The problem is that, as Thornton admits, climate change laws are going to fundamentally change our way of life. People might well agree with the face value purpose of rules, but laws must be proportionate. People may come to the view that advocates had overstated the upsides of rules, while the consequences, radical changes to our way of life, have been downplayed. The way that a democratic society captures what it believes, to negotiate differences of opinion, and to make or modify or repeal laws, is by testing debates at the ballot box. So if law is the expression of what society believes, and if society believes in the fundamental changes that Client Earth fights for, we should see two things. First, we should see that voters have been asked to give their view on climate change policy. And second, we should see Client Earth campaigns working from the basis of those democratic decisions. Neither of these can be seen. Britain's dominant political parties have developed a consensus not to offer the public a choice and not to admit that there are serious downsides to climate policy. And the laws that Client Earth have tried to force governments to adhere to have not come from the UK. Client Earth has taken the UK government to court to enforce air quality standards, citing illegal levels of pollution. But these standards came from the EU, not from Britain. Voters might agree that clean air is a good thing, which requires laws to be made. But the public were not asked about how to find a balance between standards that may be political, unrealistic and unscientific, against the loss of mobility implied by their strict enforcement. The law is a blunt instrument, and the litigious approach championed by Client Earth has allowed companies and local and national governments' decisions to be obstructed in the courts without regard for the consequences. Legal complaints argue that plans are incompatible with the UK's commitments under the Paris Agreement. It was the British government's decision to sign the Paris Agreement, but politicians have emphasised green growth, jobs and opportunities, rather than admitting that they would have to make trade-offs between emissions reductions on the one hand and economic growth and infrastructure on the other.
For the huge industrial revolution, huge business and employment opportunities.
To create the low-carbon economy we need is now a national endeavour.
The millions of jobs and billions of revenue.
250,000 jobs.
Law commits politicians to reducing emissions, but not to delivering promises that they and green campaigns have made. The fact of climate litigation proves that government has lost control of the climate change agenda. Abstract emissions reduction targets have been set by politicians who have no idea about how to achieve them and what the consequences of setting unrealistic targets may be. They are now being held to account, not by voters at the ballot box, but by the green organisations that lobbied them in courts. So if the laws that Client Earth wants to enforce don't reflect society's values, what do they represent? One answer may be popstars.
A lot of the things we like are the result of global governance of some sort or another. And we want more of it. To me, that seems like a very exciting project. You know, it's the beginning of a real 21st century world.
What I want to do is to work closely with Brian and other creative artists to try and shape this positive vision together.
Although Thornton claims that laws are a reflection of what society believes, he also claims that it is the job of artists like Brian Eno to change what society believes, and therefore what laws people accept. And some of the most depressing pop acts in history are of the same view. In 2010, Coldplay became Client Earth's patrons, and in 2019 they held a fundraising concert at the London National History Museum.
Either we choose to go on as a civilization, or we don't. The choice really is that simple. And I hope that the sale of these guitars will help Client Earth in their actions to use the law to bring about real change.
In 2019, guitarist and singer from Pink Floyd, David Gilmour, gave Client Earth nearly $17 million. But what do pop stars know about the environment, politics, policy making and governance, which makes their views more important than voters? Money. In a recent promotional video published by Client Earth called How to Start a Revolution, the group explains that their benefactors' money helped them to take the UK government to court at least 9 times.
You know, part of the problem has been that people think the system is unreformable. There's nothing you can do with it. It's just this kind of machine that trundles on.
Litigation is hand-to-hand combat. You know, it's really, it's nothing but war. If you're focused on the goal, and you've got the law on your side, and you've got the public behind you, which we now do, then you win.
This talk of revolution and of a plucky charity David taking on a government Goliath would seem to imply that the UK government and Client Earth are opponents, standing for different things. But in fact, between the years 2016 and 2019, the UK government gave Client Earth £4.5 million of taxpayers' money in grants. In reality, the court cases that brought Client Earth and the government together in battle were simply performances. They played opposing sides, but behind the curtain, they both wanted the same thing. Like many green campaigns, Client Earth has never been a charity in a normal sense. It has always been a political organisation intended to serve the interests of billionaires that fund them. The seed funding for Client Earth was provided by Winsome McIntosh, who explained that her philanthropic foundation had provided Client Earth with $600,000 to replicate the American model of green litigation in the UK. Since then, many millions from hedge fund manager billionaires has been used to circumvent the democratic process. And the problem does not stop there. The BBC's documentaries have failed to ask important questions. Despite being a public service broadcaster, the BBC believes that its role is to put the agenda of campaigning organisations, pop stars, billionaire hedge fund managers, and government policy in a favourable light. It has abolished criticism from its output so that the public hear no questions about the influence of money and special interests and the ideological agenda behind green lawfare. James Thornton is wrong. Climate laws are not a reflection of what Britain believes. They are an expression of a huge gap, a widening and deepening democratic deficit between the public and Britain's political establishment.